It started slowly. I didn't realize it had begun until I was already in the middle of it. Like that old wives' tale about the frog and boiling water. I have a mentally and emotionally draining job. When I get home from work, I usually make myself a quick dinner and settle down in front of the TV to eat and veg out before bed. It may not be the most productive way to spend my evenings, but that was okay with me. I'd never had great aspirations, and only a few hobbies, which I mostly did on the weekend. The first time I noticed something had changed, the night started off the same as any other. I sat on the couch, a cold beer in hand, and turned on the TV. Normally, I'm not much of a drinker. I tend to reserve things like that to evenings, after a particularly hard day at work, or when I'm out with friends. This evening, the lone beer was much deserved. The programs on the TV were easy to follow. The dialogue was accessible, and the plot lines comforting in their predictability. I couldn't tell you the names of the shows I watched, who was in them, or what they were about. They all melded together into a sort of white noise. The details brushed against my awareness before sliding off and fading away, only to be immediately forgotten. The next thing I knew, I was waking up on my couch, fingers wrapped loosely around the neck of my empty beer bottle. Disoriented, I sat up. The sounds of my popping and aching joints accompanied the faint sounds of the television still running on the other side of the room. Slowly, I came to realize what had happened. Like I said, I'm not much of a drinker. The combination of the rare beer and the exhaustion from last night's workday must have led me to fall asleep on the couch. I counted myself lucky that I still had time to shower before I had to be back at the office. I slogged through my shift that day, attributing my low energy to a bad night's sleep. Even after 2 cups of coffee and an energy drink, I still felt like I was dragging my feet. By the time I got home, I was utterly spent. All I wanted to do was eat a quick dinner and hit the sack early. When I opened the front door, the first thing I noticed was the TV was on. Okay, weird, but I figured I must have forgotten to turn it off before I left this morning. Before I could think better of it, I sunk into the couch, my whole body slumping into the plush upholstery. I toed off my shoes and pulled out my phone to order delivery. I was too tired to cook anyway. While I waited for my meal to arrive, I decided to watch some TV. It was already on, after all, so why not? I must have been more tired than I realized, though, because the next morning I found myself waking up on the couch again. Takeout boxes littered the coffee table, and the TV was still playing in the background. Frantic, I checked the time, and saw that I was almost late for work. I jumped up, swearing. My whole body ached from a second night on the couch. I could tell the only thing propelling me forward was adrenaline. There was no time to clean up the takeout boxes or change my clothes. There was nothing left in the boxes that might attract bugs, so I didn't worry. I could clean them up when I got home later tonight. I made a point to turn off the TV before I left, not wanting to let it run all day again. During my commute, I was forced to slow down. I take public transit and didn't have to focus on traffic, only listen for my stop. I fished around in my backpack for some gum. I didn't want to go into the office with my breath smelling like yesterday's takeout. In those moments, I realized that I couldn't remember when my dinner had arrived or what I'd eaten. I couldn't remember how it tasted, and I definitely didn't remember falling asleep on the couch for the second night in a row. It seemed impossible that I could be so tired from one bad night's sleep that I would forget all that. I racked my brain, trying to think of an explanation, but I couldn't come up with anything more plausible. I told myself that after today, I'd at least have the weekend to clean and catch up on sleep. I'd be back on track in no time. I drudged through the workday, my limbs feeling heavy. My head, by contrast, felt like balloon-like, as if it were floating above my leaden body. I was in such a fog that I almost didn't clock out with enough time to catch my train home. When I got there, everything was exactly how I left it. I made myself clear the empty takeout boxes, relieved not to find any ant or flies, and sat down on the couch. What I needed was a little TV to wind down and relax before bed. I turned the TV on. The comforting blue light of the television was the only light in the room. I hadn't noticed it get so dark. What time was it anyway? Suddenly, the sound of birds singing outside caught my attention. I looked away from the screen to see dawn's light streaming through the blinds. I'd been awake watching TV the whole night? How was that possible? It was pitch dark outside only seconds ago, and it felt as if I had barely sat down. I chalked the whole thing up to fatigue. Maybe what I actually needed was a vacation. I got up, turned off the TV, and changed out of my work clothes, which I only then realized I was still wearing. Despite the daylight, I needed to sleep. I had to close the blinds so my room would be dark enough for me to do so comfortably. I went into the kitchen to get a drink of water and had to pass through the living room to get there. Immediately, I noticed the TV was on. I distinctly remembered turning it off, though. I wondered if there was a short in a wire somewhere, causing it to turn back on. I decided to call a professional after I got some much needed sleep. The remote sat amongst empty takeout containers that I could have sworn I'd thrown away. Were they new? Had I ordered another meal I'd forgotten eating? I reached for the remote, determined to shut the TV off and get some damn rest. I pointed it at the TV, but something about the program that was running piqued my interest. For the life of me, I couldn't tell you what it was. Not the name of the show, its content, who was in it, or even what channel it was on. Yet, I felt hypnotized. In that moment, and all the moments to follow, the TV had captured my full attention. I stood there, remote in hand, and watched. I ordered more food so I wouldn't have to look away long enough to cook. More takeout boxes joined the ones already littering my coffee table and floor. I remember the food being satiating, but nothing else. I sat and watched and ate and slept and watched and watched and watched. On Monday, my boss called. I answered the phone without looking away from the TV screen, my fingers fumbling with the touchscreen of my cell. I informed my boss I wouldn't be in that day. I was sick. My voice hardly sounded like my own. It was raspy from thirst and disuse. I couldn't remember the details of the conversation I had with my boss. I only realized the call had ended when I heard the dial tone after my boss had hung up. All my focus was in the TV. The longer I watched, the harder it was to look away. The harder it was to look away, the longer I watched. My eyes burned with the need to blink, but when I tried, I couldn't. I felt the muscles around my eyes constrict as I fought to close my eyes. But they remained wide open. I couldn't blink. Panic thundered through my veins. The indistinct speech on the TV was drowned out by the blood now rushing in my ears. What the fuck was going on? My vision blurred as my body forced tears into my eyes in an attempt to lubricate them. Despite my indistinct vision, the TV held my gaze like a vice. Even as my eyes pulsed and burned, I continued to stare, unblinking, on the blurry rectangle of light. I told myself that it would be okay. Eventually, someone would come looking for me. They'd find me here, turn off the TV, and whatever weirdness I'd suddenly found myself in would be over. I tracked the passage of time by the shifting light in my peripheral vision. Day turned into night, then day again. Tuesday. Around what I thought was midday, someone knocked on my door. I couldn't look away to answer it, but I tried to call out for help. Barely a sound made it past my lips. It was as though all the muscles in my throat had seized up, leaving me unable to do little more than breathe. My phone rang and rang, but I couldn't move to answer it. I had hoped that I could feel around for it and do something to break me out of this hell I'd fallen into. But my limbs wouldn't obey me. They sat there, useless, lifeless, and unmoving. Eventually, my voicemail filled up, and shortly after, the battery died. I couldn't look away even to eat or move to go to the bathroom. All I could do was watch. Another day passed. Maybe 2. As little black dots filled my vision. It became harder to tell. Sometimes it felt like I slept, or what passed for sleep now. It was more like disassociating. Nothing had changed from one moment to the next. Yet I had the distinct impression that some time had passed. How much time? I could never tell. Was it hours? Days? Weeks? Was that someone knocking on my door again? Or was it the TV? Every time I thought I heard something going on outside, the TV grew louder, yet no more distinct. I'm not ashamed to say that if I could have, I would have cried. By this point, though, it seemed like my body had stopped producing tears. My eyes were like 2 burning coals, radiating pain through my head and face. And yet, I continued watching the damn TV like nothing was wrong. Like I was enjoying another relaxing evening after work. How long had I been like this? Why wasn't anyone coming for me? I had friends, didn't I? Where were they when I needed them most? I tried to recollect their names and faces, ready to give them an earful when I finally broke free, and couldn't. I couldn't remember a single person who I would consider a real friend. They were co-workers or acquaintances at best. I didn't have any family in town either, but surely they'd call someone to check on me if they didn't hear from me, right? They didn't. What finally saved me was a neighbor. They complained to the superintendent of my TV being too loud for days on end, and a foul smell coming from my apartment. They thought I'd died. When the police and EMTs found me, I was all but blind. My own refuse had fused me to my couch. All around me was a sea of takeout boxes and half-eaten, rotting food. Despite this, I was severely malnourished. My skin had become paper thin, and my hair and teeth had begun falling out. I only know most of this because of what I heard the doctor say during my treatment. They said I'd suffered a mental break and diagnosed me with extreme burnout and depression. They placed me in a ward where I could recover with the help of a lot of medication and treatment to my eyes. They told me I'd all but lost them from extreme ocular dehydration. Ultimately, the ward isn't so bad. I get to eat, sleep, and at least I'm not alone. The best part is there's a TV in the day area